Good morning to one and all. Good morning, participants. Good morning, Shriram San. I hope I'm audible to everybody.
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Uh, Good morning, everyone. I'm Ashwini here. I am a part of the admin team at Sakura Nihongo Resource Center. First of all, a warm welcome to all the participants as well as Shriram Varadarajan. We are so glad that Shriram San, you accepted to be a part of this webinar and address the students. And also, I'm extremely happy to see the turnout today, being a Saturday weekend morning, and the students have joined us. So, hearty welcome to all of you. So, as you all saw the agenda for the webinar today, start off with quick intro session. I would it's extremely pleasure on the part of me to welcome Shriram San. Then I'll just brief you about the do's and don'ts for the students or the webinar now. And post this, my colleague Ramasan will be doing a small or let's call it a brief intro of Sakura Nihongo Research Center, and we will hand it over to Shriram San to address the students. So coming to the do's and don'ts, I would request all the participants to be on mute and carefully listen to Shriram San's talk today. I'm sure there's a lot of information to be shared by him and you can take back the inputs. We would request the participants to maintain the decorum of the webinar today. And also by the end of the session, last 10 minutes will be dedicated to the Q&A session, the questions and answers. We would request the students to write your questions in the chat box, which will be addressed by Shriram San. And we will be concluding the webinar with a word of thanks to Shriram San. Thank you all. So to begin the webinar, and also the most important thing is that we would request the students to refrain from writing or using the whiteboard here. And the session is being recorded, and this will be posted on the social media too. So thank you so much, and kindly maintain the decorum in the meeting. So to start off, let me begin with the introduction of the speaker today, Shriram Varadarajan. He's the director of software development at IQVIA. Shriram San has over 20 years of experience in the IT industry as a technology delivery leader, cutting across various technologies and verticals. Some of his domain expertise includes energy, consumer electronics, handheld devices, and for the past 7 years, he has been Sam speaks fluent Japanese language and has also got JP and BJP certifications to his credit. He also co-authored Igai to Kantan, a tech book in Japanese published by Oracle Japan. Shriram San is a technology enthusiast who likes to keep abreast with emerging technologies. He likes to travel and also has a keen interest in literature, which he pursues in his leisure time.
Hope in Japan for Indian student seminar.
So once again, a warm welcome to Shriram San.
Thank you.
I would request all the students, participate in the webinar and listen carefully to all that Shriram San has to offer to us today. And moving on, I would be handing over the next my colleague, operations in charge SNRC. So she will be just doing a quick intro of SNRC. Thank you so much.
Good morning, one and all. It's nice to see around 80 plus participants today. So all the very best to you for a wonderful session today. I'm sure you're going to take a lot of inputs back home, and you will be surely pleasured that you have attended the session today and you're taking so much of inputs about the pharma industry and the IT sector. So it's a conglomeration of both pharma and IT is what today Sriram Sam is going to approach us with. So firstly, a very warm welcome to all of you, and a great thanks to Sriram Sam to agreeing for this Michi webinar out of his busy schedules. He has taken out time for us and accepted at one shot that he's going to address you all today. So, yeah, so as Ashwini San indicated, I'm Rama, handling the operations of SNRC. So, you all joined us here today. First, let's understand what SNRC is all about, and then move on to the most awaited talk of Sriram San. So basically, SNRC is Sakura Nihongo Resource Center. We are a core Japanese language services company. So when I say Japanese, Japan, I think something should ring a bell in your head. So we have been in Japanese language services for the past 21 years. We got incepted in 2000, and we've been serving as two lines of business, one to the corporates where we cater to every need of the corporate, and one as an institute where we teach Japanese. So basically, let me quickly cover what we do for corporates. Down the line, you might also be interested once you start working, once you get into a professional life. So to corporates, as you can see in the slide, I request all of you to be on mute. Let us not disturb others. Let us be heard properly by everyone. Can you mute please? Okay. So basically, for corporates, we do corporate trainings, document translations, business etiquette program, business etiquette program, which is actually focused at Indians to understand the Japanese mindset, how to behave with, the Japanese counterparts, and of course, why only Indians? Why should only Indians be oriented towards Japan? We always do cross-culture training for Japanese too when they are here, so that they understand Indian mindset, understand how we think, how we work, so that they are in less of shocks. So last but not the least is the bilingual placement. Now the word placement you hear, I think all your ears are up. So yes, but we are not a generic placement company. We do placements for people who are language certified, that is Japanese language certified. So these are the key aspects what we cater to corporates. And as you see the names of corporates we work with, they are in different verticals. You see the core Japanese companies, you see IT MNCs, you see the manufacturing, the automotive, and generic companies like the pharmaceutical. Every vertical we are working with corporates for their bilingual Japanese language services. Not only this, you will be surprised to see that we work with a lot of academicians too, academics. So colleges like yours, we've been working with the esteemed Indian Institute of Sciences from Bangalore, and a lot of engineering colleges, pan-India, and non-engineering colleges too. So the reason why we want to showcase this is many institutes or universities feel that there is a good demand for Japanese language when their students come out of the education background with the language on their hand. That's the reason so many colleges have approached us. So, anywhere we go to, we always see the reviews, Google reviews, how good they are. We assess them by their reviews and try to understand the services what they cater. So these are the reviews given by our own students. These are organic reviews given by our own students who have learned from us. You can check it on Google. So what do we do as an institute? People do come to us for learning, but there is a lot of other value add which they take back along with their learning. So they come to us, let us say for Japanese has 5 JLPT levels, what we call it as certified levels. But other than that, they take back a lot of valuable inputs from us. So we are just not an institute catering to their JLPT learning, but it's an immersive experience that they get with us. So what all do? We conduct every month a MICHI program, what we call it, which is an industry connect. MICHI means pathway in Japanese. So we showcase the pathway for these all students like you with connecting them with the industry leaders. Apart from that, we are tied up with few schools in Japan for higher education in Japanese. And of course, the word placement, as I said, will ring a bell in you, but it is bilingual placement. So we support corporates for their requirements and bridge it with the students who have Japanese skills with them. So every session of ours, Japan being a country very rich in their culture and very, they are very specific about things, how to do and not to do. So we always orient every training of ours with the cultural orientation, the know-how about Japan, how it needs to be, how you should learn. So when you're learning a language, it's not just the language. You have to learn about the land and the people there. So that is what our approach has been. So let me not take much of your time. I know each one of you is interested to hear from Sriram San. So we are very active on social media. We have around 1,000 plus followers, I'm sorry, 10,000 plus followers on our FB page and so on and so forth. So you can follow us on our social media, understand what all we do, and reach out to us wherever required. So I will stop here and I will give it over to Sriram San. So once again, a warm welcome to you, Sriram San, and I hope the students will benefit a lot and take away a lot from today's session. Over to you, Sriram San. Thank you once again. Have a great day.
Thank you, Rama-san, and thank you, Ashwini-san, for the kind introduction. Let me share my screen. Just let me know once you're able to see it. Do you see my screen now?
Yes, sure, sir. Please go.
Great. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Or I should also say Ohio gozaimasu. I saw some of you have already typing that in the chat box, the Japanese way of greeting everybody. Ohayou gozaimasu and good morning. First of all, I should actually thank you. Thank you all participants for taking your time on leisurely Saturday morning to understand, to take part in this session. That's very commendable. I really appreciate that. I thank you. And I'm really hoping that I would really do some justice to the time that you've allocated for all of us. Yeah. And thanks for the warm introduction to Ashwini and Rama-san. Really appreciate that, and overall to the SNRC as well. Let me know if you're able to hear me loud and clear, and if you're not, just tell me. I'm not really known for very loud speaking person, so just stop me then and there. Yeah.
You are
All right.
audible, Sriram, sir.
Thank you. Thanks, Ashwini. Yeah. So today, you would have seen me, my title from the introduction. It says I'm a director IT, and you might be slightly wondering that what is an IT guy going to talk about the healthcare or the Japan system, etc. Yeah, because the company that I work for, it's called IQVIA. IQVIA, IQVIA. That's how we pronounce it. So we are into healthcare data analytics and clinical trials and research. I'll actually touch upon that in the subsequent slides. And I've been working with this organization for the last 7 years now. And I know healthcare and healthcare analytics or pharma is an ocean. So I have barely scratched the surface, I would say. So I would probably share some of my learnings that I've done in the last few years. I'm pretty sure Some of you guys who are already pharma background and pharma students would have much deeper and wider knowledge than me. I'll be glad to learn from you guys as well. So if you have any insights, yeah. So we can, I mean, I know there is about a 10-15 minutes of session time allocated for the Q&A. So you could always give some valuable inputs back to me as well. I can take it. Yeah. In today's session, what I'm planning to do is I would probably cover three major aspects, or rather I would touch upon three aspects considering we have only 40 minutes time. The first point being healthcare and healthcare analytics, and what are the companies basically do around that, and how is it interlinked with the pharma world, and likewise how is IQVIA as a company contributing to this industry as well as to the mankind. And number two is on the data analytics part of it. I mean, number two is data analytics as well as the Japanese healthcare in specific. So how Japan as a country is actually working towards it, and then considering their ecosystems, considering their demographies and their healthcare system, how are they working it out, and how smart it is, how effective it is. That is something I would want to touch upon. And the third point being this is the industry and this is how the domain works. So how do you jump into this bandwagon, as a aspirant or as a new, the guys who are passing out of the college and who wants to get into this industry and make a mark for yourself or make a career out in this particular field of science. How do we basically do it? So I would actually touch upon both from the IT as well as from the healthcare side of it. What are the things we generally focus? I can probably talk about that, and then some of the recommendations I can tell you. So that's how I wanted to space it out. Yeah. So let me start with what exactly is the healthcare and the healthcare analytics is all about. Yep. So if you see, the healthcare is the central core of this entire industry, whether it is the pharma or whether it is the healthcare service providers. The core is the healthcare system underneath. Yeah. So in my approach, I'm not going to talk about the hospital or the healthcare centers per se. I would rather talk about the pharma and the drug research and all that, because there are different subsets within the healthcare system by itself. So let's talk about more on the drugs, what is the typical life cycle of a drug and all that. Yeah. So usually how it happens is, as you see here, the first point is the starting point is the drug research and development. So you would have seen in the last 2 to 3 years, due to this COVID pandemic situation, we all got to know a lot about how the pharma companies work and how the drugs are basically launched. So what happens basically is that there is a disease that is first identified, and then a pharma company basically invests a certain, let's say about $10 million in exploring whether a new drug can be launched into the market. So that is where the research part comes into the picture, where the pharmacist or the experts, the healthcare experts like the doctors and life sciences experts, all these set of core research team, clinical research people, they come together and they basically start the drug research. So they start experimenting, they start creating different combinations and all that. So once they come to a typical finalized drug composition stage, so they will have to basically test that out, correct? So that is when the clinical trials start and to come into the picture. So the clinical trials, as you know, you cannot directly, I've got a drug, I cannot really go and give you guys, okay, identified a drug, why don't you eat this and tell me whether it is working? That is super risky, right? I mean, you may not be even alive tomorrow to tell me that it's whether it is working or not. So the World Health Organizations or the health regulatory bodies of multiple countries have got very stringent compliances and the safety measures for all these clinical trials. There are so many phases that are involved in the clinical trials by itself. So you basically start with some animals, as you would have seen, we call it guinea pigs or different animals. They slowly start. And even in the animals, you cannot really kill them. I mean, if the, even if the animal is dead, you know, your trials, there will be a lot of questions or the action, punitive actions that will be taken by the government on you, right? So once we go through all this, and then we call it a trial phase one. So the actual phase one is when we know the drug is pretty safe, and then we can start giving it out to the consenting patients. So we actually talk to the patients. We tell them that we are going to put you in a clinical trial program for this particular drug, and then we will be continuously monitoring you on every aspect of your progress and how your body reacts to it. That's called the phase one. So this whole clinical trial management itself is a multi-million-dollar exercise, and it takes about 4 to 5 years typically. And you would have seen the COVID medications came out in just 1.5 years, and you might be wondering how that happened. You would have seen there is a clause, they said, for emergency purposes. So whatever drug that the vaccinations that we are going through is approved with a star on top, condition supply. That condition supply is the emergency use. Yes. So it's not claimed as 100% the final vaccination. And once we've gone through this clinical trials, what we do is the launch to market. So we actually, after trials, approvals by all the regulatory bodies, we actually launch the drug to the market. And then we start, I mean, we as it's not IQVIA, the pharma companies basically sell these drugs. And then next what happens, once you start selling, it doesn't end there. You basically, the pharma company needs to understand how the drug is performing. And then there is a huge ecosystem after the drug reaches to the public. So those are some things that we actually, that is when IQVIA again comes into picture in terms of connected intelligence, where we start gathering a lot of data and then does a lot of research insights on those data, and then feed it back to the pharma companies. And then comes the patient insights. So it's not only about the drug's performance, it's also about how effective the drug is on a particular patient, on a particular disease. So that is covered in patient insights, which again, IQVIA plays a significant role. And then the last one, we've all done all of this, and then all the data is gathered and everything. So these are all historical information, all the diagnostic data. So with this, what is going to happen is what is predictive analytics is all about. Let's say you've got the data of last 5 years, and then how my drug is going to perform in the next 1 year or so is coming in the predictive analytics. So that data is actually fed back into the drug research and development. So this is how a typical cycle in a pharma drug life cycle works. Yeah. I mean, this whole exercise is all about, this is for one drug. This whole exercise runs about 7 to 8 years time. It is a long and a multi-million-dollar exercise. Right, I'll move on. So here, what does IQVIA do in this whole, this pharma healthcare analytics part? So as I said, IQVIA is not about pharma manufacturing company. So there are manufacturing companies like drug manufacturers like Pfizer's, Lilly's, Ciplas, and Amgen's, and so many companies. So we work very closely with these pharma companies. As I said, right from the drug research stage till the patient insights and to the predictive analytics, we take part in all the cycles. And then we actually provide custom intelligence, consulting services into all of it. So the first part, if you see human data science, you might be wondering what this is all about. It is about the data associated with the people that are actually involved in this whole healthcare ecosystem. The healthcare ecosystem runs on people, correct? I mean, end of the day, the people are the ones that are consuming the drugs, and the data are associated with that is completely with us, with IQVIA. In the last 50, 60 years of data is with us. So we provide a lot of custom intelligence. We provide a lot of intelligence, competitive intelligence, pricing insights, marketing insights, all that we provide using this human data science concept. Empowering pharma companies from molecule to market. As I said earlier, from the drug research, from the day one of the drug research till molecule, when I say market, till the drug is launched into the market, everything is actually empowered from the back end by IQVIA for these pharma companies. And then the third important thing is the rare diseases research. This is the most important contribution from IQVIA to the world or to the mankind, I would say. In each of the countries, we identify the rare diseases where you hardly are able to diagnose certain what kind of disease it is. And even if you are able to identify what disease it is, you do not have a drugs for that. And there are some, we call it orphan drugs or rare diseases. You know, there are two categories. And these are diseases, or these are the symptoms that are really not curable, that are still in the research stage, is something which IQVIA has invested a lot of money into it from the organization by itself. And we do a lot of research around it. And we were able to cure and identify remedies for many such rare diseases in the last 1 decade or so. And we are continuing to do it. And then the last one is the clinical trials and R&D. You would have heard about this particular information in the last 2 to 3 years, where all the COVID tamasha was going on, where pharma companies were rushing through the clinical trials and then they were actually launching. In fact, most of the clinical trials that were conducted for the COVID vaccinations were actually done by IQVIA. So these are some of the very, very important contributions that IQVIA do as a line of business, as well as contribution to the mankind. Coming to the connected intelligence, some of the terms might be slightly, very unique to the industry, but try to understand. So when I say
webinar.
When you say connected intelligence, there are, we have three major aspects to it. As I said, the first one is the healthcare insights that you can trust. So when, as I said, after the drug is launched, I mentioned that IQVIA gathers a lot of data continuously, from the pharma companies, from the healthcare organizations, from the health welfare ministries also. So how do we do it? We actually have data acquisition partners. So these partners work with all these companies, and then we establish the data acquisition channels from these companies. Let's say, for example, a hospital, we tie up with the hospital to give all the prescription information. We tie up with the pharma chain. Let's say you have a Apollo pharmacy or you have a MedPlus pharmacy. So we tie up with these guys and we actually get all the prescription information. We call it RX. Sorry guys, could you please go on mute?
Snehal San, request you to please mute yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, Sriram San, please continue.
No worries. Yeah. So that's how we actually start collecting the data. So once we have the data, what we do, we actually do a lot of geographic know-hows, and then we actually build a lot of insights. Insights, when I say, we actually build intelligence in terms of how the drug is performing, what kind of, let's say one hospital, you as a pharma company have have produced a the paracetamol medicine. And then you need to understand whether your drug is actually prescribed by the doctor for fever, or is there some other drug the doctor or the hospital is prescribing for the patient for a fever. Then you should actually understand. Then such kind of data basically comes to IQVIA. Then we do a lot of, with the information that we have the last 50 years or so, and then with the new data that is coming in, we apply a lot of big data analytics or machine learning algorithms, and then tell the pharma company that because of this reason, this hospital is actually not prescribing your paracetamol medicine to the patients. So you will have to probably fix this area. Maybe the price is high, maybe the side effects are more, or maybe your paracetamol drug is acting instead of 3 days, it is actually taking 5 days to cure a cure a fever. Those are some things. Such information we actually provided back to the pharma companies. Then they go back to the drawing board and then work back on their drug composition. So that's how, when I say connected intelligence works, this is how we actually loop back from the pharma company back to the pharma company with all the data and intelligence. Yeah. All right, so that is about, that's a very, very, very high view, probably a 30,000 feet high overview of how healthcare and healthcare analytics basically work together and using the data and the analytics part. Now, I actually want to touch upon the second part, which is the healthcare system, healthcare ecosystem in Japan. As you all know, Japan's economy is one of the most robust, if not in the top 3, it is in the top 5. For a very, very long time, Japan has been in the top 3, US, the European, and then the Japan. So that is how the economy has been such robust in terms of the spending power, in terms of the power in the currency, in terms of the infrastructural development, in terms of the healthcare ecosystem. With all of this, Japan is or has been or is and will continue to be one of the most mature countries or geographies for all of this. And it still continues to do so. But as you all know that Japan has its own challenges in terms of like any other developed country which is going through now. The longevity of people has significantly increased in Japan over the last 2 decades. And unfortunately, the younger population is very, very less. As you would have seen, I don't know if you have already seen it in the general information or not. Japan's 80% of the population is actually is quite old, and the working population, which is under 40, is very, very less. So that actually, as they say, one man's challenge is other man's opportunity. Yeah. So this also creates a lot of employment opportunities in Japan. I will probably touch upon that at a later part in this slide, but let me come to the healthcare ecosystem for that. So in terms of the healthcare ecosystem, Japan is actually going through a lot of changes because the aged people who are more than 65 above is actually, as you see, is more than 27% of the country's population, which is massive. And it's pretty huge. And likewise, the country is actually fast responding to all this growing challenges. Yeah. And what are they doing? They are actually the first part is they have digitized the whole healthcare ecosystem, and they have been doing it, and every year on year there is a significant, about 10% of, as you said, it's 11.2% of digitization, improvisation that they are doing. When I say digitization, creating digital records of a patient, creating digital invoicing, digital ordering, everything is digital. That means they call it MHLW in Japan, which is Ministry of Health, Labor, Welfare. So the network between the MHLW, the pharma companies, the hospitals, and the end patient, every end citizen is completely digitized. So they have a seamless connection to everything. So there is a 360-degree connectivity from all of this, guys. Anybody can access anyone. That's the kind of seamless and transparent connectivity they've done. And likewise, the investments from Japan as a country. So there are three types of care that Japan is primarily in the healthcare side. There are three types they're actually focusing on. One is the healthcare, which take healthcare data, which talks about your insurance claims and all that. And then the medical care is all about the hospital facilities, your entire treatment life cycle and that kind of a data. And then the third one is the long-term care is specifically focused on the aged people who are actually enrolled to this. And then the long-term care is usually a slightly bit of a critical care one, where there is a lot of investment and a lot of efforts also, infrastructural efforts also that is being invested. Because so much of money is invested here, Japan is always open. Japan healthcare system is always open to the global investments. Yeah. And then the point number 4, if you see, so since they have all the digitized data, now what they do is, they are actually driving this whole of this program through artificial intelligence. And all the top companies, if you've seen the Toshiba, I think Rama-san just showed me about Toshiba's and Hitachi's and all these companies. So these are companies, they're investing more than 10 billion Japanese yens year on year in all this artificial intelligence driven healthcare. So this is again a huge set of opportunity, I would say. And then, as I said, continuing about the initiatives. So Japan has been, traditionally the picture that we have about Japan is it's a very closed country. They want to keep within themselves and all that. But that is actually those myths, those are all not actual facts anymore. In the last 10 years, Japan has opened up a lot to the global economy. And they have started setting up a lot of innovation hubs where they invite so many foreign countries, foreign companies to talk about their innovations, to present their innovations. And then if they find the innovation to be really feasible, the government itself invests a lot of money into those ideas. And then the second point is the regulatory sandbox system. This is, when I say regulatory, as I said, every country has its own healthcare regulatory compliances. So Japan has its own. But when I said sandbox, that means they've kind of created a mock regulatory system where the companies can play around so that it doesn't directly impact the end patients first itself. Till things are stable, you basically come inside and work it out, execute it, research around all these things, try implementing it without impacting anybody directly, the end patients or end citizens. So those kind of flexibilities have been created. And then third one is the addressing their aging challenge that they have. They have created something called a Well Aging Society Summit. And this is an annual summit that they run year on year across all the countries. They do it in different countries. And they invite a lot of companies and a lot of governments to come and talk about it and then share their thoughts, take away the best practices back home. So these are very, very key initiatives which runs in millions and millions of dollars by the government. And as I said, since there are so much of money investment involved, there is obviously direct employment opportunities also that get created around this. Now, as I spoke about Japan healthcare and the healthcare system in common, and I would actually want to talk about the technologies that basically are driving the healthcare digitization. So I know many of you in the participant list here today are pharma folks, and I think some of you guys are from the IT background as well. So even for you pharma folks, it'll be nice if you actually know a little bit about what are these technologies all about, how these are actually empowering your life sciences or the pharma, healthcare ecosystem. And these are some of the technologies. And good news is that most of them are actually open source. And you can actually go ahead and start. For example, Scala, Spark, Snowflake. These three are the key big data ecosystem where if you have petabytes and gigabytes, gigabytes and petabytes of data that are coming in, this is the ecosystem that will actually process the data in minutes. In general, usually it takes, if I have 2-3 petabytes of data, if I need to run a report, It takes 10 hours for complex data algorithms. But with this ecosystem of Scala Spark, it actually runs in under 20 minutes or under 30 minutes. So that fast and that precise these technologies are. And likewise, if you want to focus on the machine learning or the artificial intelligence, you have your Python. This is another very, very fast growing technology that is it's also pretty easy for us to learn as well. So some of these technologies, please read through them. And if you start getting a liking around it, please start working out and please start creating some mock projects for yourself and then try working them out. Yes. And how do you get there basically? Yeah. So as I said, we have the healthcare system, we have the Japan specific information. You also knew about the technologies around it. Now, as an aspirant, how do I jump into it? Yeah. So there are some very, very basic things that you would actually see, whether you are an IT person or whether you are a pharma person that you want to join in. So you actually have to have certain basic fundamentals correct. As I said, the first one is the KISS. I mean, KISS is actually keep it simple, stupid. Always, always, always get the basics very strong and very clear. Doesn't matter what field you are in, whether you are in the IT or in the pharma. Please keep your fundamentals. Please keep your basics. Get your basics very strong. And on top, you can build anything very easily. If you have a shaky fundamentals, you would remain a shaky person throughout your career. You would never get a chance later in your career to go back and rebuild your fundamentals. That will be too late. So this is your foundational period. Spend next couple of years, get your fundamentals strong. And next is aiming right. If you're getting into a healthcare analytics side, if you're becoming a software engineer or a data scientist, you need to become a typical software engineer. Don't just become a coder. There is a very, very, very strong difference between a person who can just open an IDE and start writing code. Software engineering is all about knowing how software companies work, how software engineering life cycle works, how a product life cycle, how a project life cycle works. So if you don't understand this clearly, even if you learn a lot of new technologies, you would still be a sloppy person. Yeah, that is again tying back to your basics, but it is very, very important. Unfortunately, my company, my teams, I have people with 10 plus years, about 15 years experience. They are some of those guys, very sorry to say, they are not very strong software engineers. They are good coders, good jugaad guys who can write some tricky workarounds and then fix the problems. Never resort to tricky shortcuts, tricky workarounds. Jugards, as they say in Hindi, will give you a short-term pleasure, but long-term pain, right? And then the trend. You should always, it's not only about the technology, you should always understand what is the current trend in the technology areas or current trend in the pharma healthcare systems. It's very, very important. So how do you understand this? Go through a lot of videos, go through a lot of seminars, webinars, read through people's publication. We call it key opinion leadership or thought leadership network. So research for such leaders in certain, let's say you want to focus on cancer oncology related researchers or ophthalmology one, search in the internet for key opinion leaders in these respective areas, follow them, understand what they're talking about, what are the recommendations they have. So those are some of the important things that you would empower while you are in the academics. And then as a tech person, hands-on, be a hands-on person. You can't wait to get a job to start learning your coding. You basically create your Git space. Git is an open coding forum, open code repository forum. So you have your repository in place. You start doing your mock projects. And then when you're attending interviews, actually showcase what you've actually done. that will only impress me as a IT leader. I would see, okay, I know this guy can put in some efforts with some grooming. I can bring this guy up fast. I don't want a clean slate kind of a guy. Yes. And then the last one, as I said, keep reading a lot of white papers, research papers from the key opinion leaders, the industry leaders. Those are all very, very important one. Then the last but not the least, be honest to yourself. So always keep doing an honest reality check of yourself, whether you are really capable enough, you are as convincing as for yourself. You don't have to convince anybody or impress anybody. Are you impressed? Are you convinced that you are pretty strong? If you are not able to do that, please take a help of some of an expert, and go to an expert who can give you a very honest, show you the mirror. Talk to such people and then understand, tell them what you are, and they will actually first tell you where you are, then tell you what you need to do to get to where you want to be. It is a very important aspect. Be honest to yourself throughout your career is very, very important. Yep. And then the last part, working in Japan. So far we spoke about how do we get into the industry, and then I also touched upon uh, how the Japan system works. Japan is a very unique and very interesting country. Yeah. As I have actually worked with Japanese people, and I have lived in Japan for many years. I've worked with Japanese people for 15 odd years. Yeah. But one of the very, 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 very hardworking and extremely focused set of people. When I say focused, they start working morning 9 o'clock and they work with the same energy at night 11 o'clock in the office, and then back at the office the next day morning at 9 o'clock. So that they actually do that for years together. So we also do such hard work, but for shorter periods of time, if you have a tighter deadlines, we actually focus to do that and then complete it. But the Japanese guys tend to do this day on day, week after week, month after month, year after year. They actually do that kind of a focused hard work. And uh, see, maybe in early 2000s, if you had asked me, yes, it would have been a little difficult to crack into this Japan working space, because they were very closed and there was a lot of language constraints. But in the last 10 to 15 years, things have changed a lot and they have opened up a lot to the outside culture. Yeah, and there is a lot of opportunities that are getting created. And as people, as the working culture, they focus a lot on the team culture than individual excellence. So this is very different from many other countries. If you have a team of 10 people, if one guy is a superstar, and then he will be treated like a royalty in that particular team. But whereas in Japan, even if you're a superstar, you would actually be one among the 10. And then the management appreciates the whole team. And then if one guy fails, management pulls up the whole team and then they reprimand it. That's the kind of team culture. So I mean, you would have heard this phrase from King Arthur: one for all and all for one. That is how typically it works. It's very, very important that each one covers each other's back. That is a very, very important thing. And then in terms of the learning and language, of course, it is very important even now. Why I'm saying, even though the country has opened up for the opportunities and all that, see, if you want to flourish and then grow fast and then become one among the core Japanese working set of culture, you need to know the language, and you definitely need to respect the culture. Before even you learn the language, the most important thing is you actually learn, either either you adapt to the culture or respect the culture. Never look at the culture as a third person standing outside. Please do not do that. That is not just for Japanese, that is for any culture, I would say. Let's say you are in Karnataka going to somewhere else, or you have come from somewhere else to Karnataka. Appreciate and enjoy the culture. Yeah, because these are all civilizations. Japanese civilization is thousands of years old, as old as our Indian civilization, I would say. So respect it. Once you start respecting the culture, and then food habits, you should actually start learning the language. They always say that, learning a new language always opens up your brain. Your brain is enhanced by the number of languages actually you are learning, right? So it's always nice to learn, and you will be very surprised to see Indians are able to pick up the Japanese language very fast compared to anybody else in the world. It is very easy to learn and to speak on a day-to-day conversation, daily conversation. It's very easy to pick up. Unless you are planning to master it and then become a scholar, that is obviously going to be difficult for any language. But the day-to-day business conversation level is very easy. And then this is where people like, collaborative players from India, SNRC, for example, Sakura Nihongo is one of the key players, I would say. They've been doing a great job. I've known them. I've been observing them since the early 2000s. Some of their guys who trained there, some of the guys who trained there in the language have worked with me earlier in the past. They've maintained that standard very well. They actually strive to train the language in that language, true essence of that language. Right? So that is very important. And likewise, there are opportunities getting created for the bilingual engineers. We call them BSc, bridge system engineers, as the name suggests. You are the bridge between the Japan and the Indian offices. So you work closely with both the sides. I've played such roles in the past. So these are all very key roles, and such roles are very, very valuable even now. And for that, you definitely need the language culture, and that is when companies like SNRC can definitely help you out. And they've got some pretty good teachers as far as I know. Yeah. So that is where I think probably my time's up. I'll stop there. We can probably open up for the questions, and then as I always do, for a software engineer, these are some of the, as I mentioned, focus on the software engineering is very important. For that, these 3 books are like the Bibles or Gitas or Qurans, whatever you call it. So you have to read through this and then understand how do you write a very clean code. Yep. So with that, I stop. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sriram San. It is great hearing to you. I mean, from the technology, from the healthcare to Japan. It's been a clean talk and, very nice to hear. I think the students have also enjoyed the hearing. Now, I would request each one of you to put it on chat if you have any queries relating to, either the pharma, the sync, or if some of them are coders. Okay, we already have one from Nikat. Ashwini-san, can you read it out, please?
How do a M.Pharm fresher apply in Japan for job opportunities? Yes. So one, as I said, you may have to probably, people like, as I said, SNRC, they have a lot of bridge with the lot of companies. And then with a little bit of language and with their business connects, I think you will be able to crack into some of their positions. And likewise, many of these companies are also setting up a shop in India directly or indirectly. When I say shop, they're the offices, sorry. So you could actually work there for a few months or a couple of years, and then you could travel to Japan. So those are different modalities that you can actually explore.
Can we have the next question, next query? I would also request the students to just, click on the link that we have posted in the IQA webinar on WhatsApp group. Just leave your feedback about today's webinar also. Can we have the next query? Anyone else? Yeah, we have from Sudarshan Srinivas. In terms of job opportunities in Japan, would you say there are more opportunities in industry?
Good question, actually.
Yeah, okay.
So I am. Let me admit it. I've been always exposed to the industry side of it, and I have seen opportunities more on the industry side. I'm not sure about the academia, right?
What is the minimum qualifications to enter Japan? Is it B.Pharm? Is it sufficient? The next question, should I answer?
A bachelor's degree is sufficient as long as you have the right qualifications, right skill sets, and maybe the language that adds a lot of value. Okay. Any opportunities for MSc textile chemistry
Chemistry
graduates?
graduation.
I'm not aware of this particular part, Rohan. I'm sorry. And Jagriti, when does the data analytics come in place? During or, oh, lovely question. During or after pharmacovigilance? So the data analytics comes, Jagriti, right at the, I would say the launch to market, correct? So when I say launch to market, even before launch to market, the clinical trial data also we actually gather. So it is like a 360 degree. I wouldn't say that at this point only everything starts, because as I showed you, it is a cyclic process. The data gathering, data analysis starts from at the trial and the launch, and then goes all the way across to the patient insights and competitive intelligence, and then the predictive analytics. So it is a cyclic process, I would say.
We have a question from Apurva Misra. How to learn Japanese language while studying in college?
I
How
think
does
you
your
guys can answer that.
organization help in that?
Yeah.
Ashwini or Rama.
Please.
Ashwini or Rama, I think you can take this up, I guess.
I'm sorry. I was on mute. I'm sorry. So Apurva-san, of course, we are training a lot of students who are currently even studying. So when students come to us, it is from, a school goer till a top management professional. So we can surely cater to your need. I will connect with you and let you know how the learning of Japanese has to start.
Good.
Yeah.
And then the next question is the research opportunities in Japan for a pharma person to enter into IT. Definitely. In fact, if you see our IQVIA's employee list, we are 20% IT and 80% of pharma, life sciences, and doctors in ours. We are only a small unit as an IT, These guys are our end customers, and they are the guys who run our organization, to be honest. We are the engine that empowers them from the behind.
We have a next question from Siddhi Malani. Which are the best universities for PhD programs in Japan with scholarship?
It depends what kind of courses, what kind of research area that you're picking up, Siddhi. Usually the Japan university, the Tokyo, Haneda universities, or Osaka, University of Hokkaido, University of Osaka, and these are some of the universities that actually do get recognized across the globe. But you should definitely pick and choose based on what is your area of interest.
Yeah. Anyone else? Any other queries? Anyone else? Yeah, we have one more from Subhamoy Kundu. I'm passionate about machine learning and AI. I have a master's degree in maths, a bachelor's degree in stats. Where do I look into for job?
Wow, I'm looking for you actually. The stats person with the machine learning and AI. I would say Shubhamoy, right? Shubhamoy. Please do learn a little bit of big data and Python technology. You will be a hot cake in the industry. Spend next 3 to 6 months, learn these, maybe reach out to me again.
May I speak to you, sir?
Sorry?
Sir, I am the one who is questioning you, sir. So
Yes,
I just,
Shubham.
yes, sir. So about this big data analysis, sir, I am just trying to learn Hadoop, because Hadoop is very thing. So sir, that's so coming from you. What would you say to me? Like me, guys, I mean,
Shubhamoy son, you can switch on the video and speak.
can I? Okay, okay.
Sure. In fact, I would love all of you guys to switch on the video. You know, I really miss talking to people working from home for the last 1.5 years. Yes,
Actually,
Shubham, I can see you.
kind of. Hi, sir. So yeah, sir. I have actually kind of applying through this stuff, and now the Japan. Actually, I have actually Japan is kind of fascinating for me, because they have invented bullet train Shinkansen. It's amazing technologies, and they have some technologies with AIs, and their stock market is very good. Their stock market is very good. So that's why I was actually kind of fascinated to work in this country for AI. So that's why I was asking for you. What kind of things? I mean, I'm not gonna jumpstart right away. So
Are you still in your college or have you completed?
no, sir. Actually, that's what I'm just in my last year in masters. Yeah.
Okay. As I said, machine learning, to start with machine learning, you may have to probably start learning about the data. So understand how Scala, Spark, Hadoop, these three work. Yeah, these are where your data basically starts. And then on top, you basically learn Python. Python is the program that runs the machine learning algorithms. You need to learn this first. Then I'm sure the opportunities will come. As I said, you get your basics right. Do some of your sample projects. Then I'm sure you will have enough career opportunities.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sure. And we have more questions here.
Yeah. We have one more question. To enter into IT, what additional qualification required for pharma person?
Good. See, pharma, usually pharma person, if you talk from my company's perspective, we deal with a lot of data. So apart from the pharma background, if you are able to understand some data technologies like Hadoop, HDFS, Hive, that will definitely help. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not too much, just get the basics of big data technologies. And I'm sure you can pick up once you're in the industry, you will pick up more. What about the job scenario for fiber science or textile engineering in Japan? I'm sorry, I am not too much exposed to this particular field. Apurva?
We have another question from Sudarshan.
Sudarshan.
One more question, sir. For pursuing a master's course like an MS, how would you compare Japan to places like USA and Europe?
Good point, actually. The Japan degrees are also, the Japan masters are also equally, what do you say, given a good weightage, provided you actually do it with the right set of universities. But one good thing is that you don't have too many mushroom kind of universities in Japan. So there are few universities, and most of these universities are actually well recognized, and the standards are pretty high. And on the contrary, you don't really need to know the expert language to do those master's degree. You can actually go to Japan, still do your master's in English itself. Some of these universities provide that facilities also. I have known some of my friends who knew nothing about the language, who came to Japan, did the master's, and along the side they actually learned the language.
We have a question from Apurva Mishra. How to start
pharmaceutical
company on a small scale in India?
Well, when you say pharma company, what is it? Are you talking about pharma manufacturing or a distribution? What is it? Yeah. Distribution, yes. Distribution, I honestly, all you need is probably a network. You really need to establish a network, and you need to have the right kind of licensing, because not anybody and everybody can start pharma distribution, because it's a very highly sensitive this thing. So you need to have that government licensing. So read about it, right? Qualifications, experience, licensing, all that are mandatory. It's not that easy like an IT startup, to be honest. Shreya, due to this corona, many of us have lost hope in work as an intern in a company like physical
Due to corona crisis, yeah.
experience. So their online courses, exams sufficient, or we need something. Well, good point, Shreya. You know, the physical or peer learning is definitely missed out because of this whole virtual working mode. But somehow, you know, this being the reality, this being the normal, we have learned to adapt ourselves. So, for example, in my company, in my teams, in spite of people not being physically together, I've started bringing in interns. So we have onboarded interns virtually also, and then we have had those kind of pair programmings and then mentorship virtually set up to people. So it is still possible, but just that the efforts from your side as an intern will be 50-60% more than what you would actually do when you are physically there. How to connect third-party product manufacturing for pharma in India if you have all required. So this is purely on the product manufacturing and distribution side, Apurva. I may not have that full information. You may probably reach out to some experts from the pharma manufacturers like companies like Pfizer's and Ranbaxy's and on such kind of companies. Could you check with them, please? M-Pharm pharmaceutic students will, with learning Python, help me to become an asset for company because Python is completely different from my field. So Nikat, learning anything will not bring you down or will not significantly make you a superstar. The whole important thing is after learning that, how well are you implementing that in wherever you are? For example, being a pharma student, learning a Python, if you're able to join a company, the thing is you will have a slight edge because you will understand the pharma data and also the process behind it, right? In terms of how the pharmacovigilance, how the trials, what are the drugs. There are, I don't know if you are studying about ATC level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5s and different drug compliances. I mean, from different HIPAA compliance, for example, in the US. And these are so many different scenarios are there. And we are all going to integrate all of that in our analytics and then bring out the intelligence. So I'm sure with knowing the technology and with putting to actually know where to use them in your pharma background will definitely help. Japanese language compulsory to work in Japan companies, how will it affect your job? Well, it is not compulsory, but it is always nice to have, otherwise, you will work in a corner and you will sit in the corner and work and then go back home. See, end of the day, you all want to grow, you all want to be part of a bigger network, then you all want to make your presence felt. Yeah, I think that will definitely help learning the language. It'll just accelerate your growth if that's what you're going to ask, affecting your job. Yes. What are the research opportunities in pharma Japan? There is a lot. I think some of the topics I actually covered in my presentation as well. Plenty of opportunities.
So I would like to thank Sriram-san for your patient answering of all the questions. I hope all of you have got your answers. So let's take this last question from Pragati Kamble. Sir, I am a pharmaceutical
Quality assurance student.
Yeah.
Is it necessary to do clinical research course or other courses like regulatory affairs? So this depends on what exactly you want to do. Clinical research is one aspect. Likewise, regulatory is another aspect. If you want to go that way, yes, you need to know. You really need to do that kind of a course.
Thank you, Sriram-san. I would remind the students again to just fill in the feedback forms. The link has been shared in the WhatsApp group. Thank you so much, Shriram sir. That's wonderful
you.
connecting with you. I'm glad, and I know that all the participants have also benefited from the talk today. I'll just hand it over to Ramazan.
Thanks a lot, Sriram Sam. It was great. I mean, so many questions by the students too. So I think they've got a good response and what they're looking forward for. So it was a great session. I hope all the students have really enjoyed the session today and learned a lot, took back. That's the main thing. Why are we doing or conducting these sessions? It's basically everyone should take back something, improvise or think in a different angle about their careers. All of you are young students who are going to become great professionals down the line. So I hope you have enjoyed this and look forward for more such sessions. And thanks for this connect, Sriram Sam. We really are grateful to you to give us this time and ensure that the students get back what they want.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you
Rama
very
and
much, sir.
Ashwini-san. Thanks a lot for this. I always like to, I started my career as a trainer. So I actually like to talk to people and then share some knowledge. I mean, and take back some inputs. So it was a good opportunity after a long time. After I got into the IT industry, I've not been doing a lot of talking to people, honestly speaking. So it was good to get back to what I used to like. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Thanks everybody. You have a great weekend. Happy learning and then good luck to your future. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thanks.